Morning. My name is Susan Johnson, and I am the membership secretary for the International Wizard of Oz Club. And I'm coming to you this morning with a story from Oziana to celebrate the 50th anniversary of this publication of original stories and poems and drawings by members of the Oz Club. Publication has been going since 1971, and this story, which is called The Fabulous Frogman, and is by Joe Bongiorno and illustrated by Darrell Spradlyn. It is a sequel to another story in a 1990 issue of Oziana called The Final Fate of the Frogman. The royal palace was in a state of anxious unease, and not a few tears were shed by those unaccustomed to tales of woe. Even this was not to one such as they, but to what the outside world considered unworthy of such comprehension, the fearsome fate of a forsaken frogman. Yet perhaps one not so grievously fated, for the frogman had been a friend to so many at one time, and to hear of his suffering was a thing that no one had anticipated and even less would hear. Woot the Wanderer had not, in truth, intended to return to the Emerald City to make the report of what he had seen and heard. He had other plans that he had deemed important, and a side trip to the bustling green city was not among them. Yet, as he traveled northeast, attempting unsuccessfully to get the frogman's story out of his mind, he thought that surely, after some hardy adventures in the company of friends and the distractions they'd help provide, he'd forget the pitiable creature and once again find contentment in his nomadic roving beneath the whispering trees and the sparkling stars. But it was not to be. He traveled far and wide in the magical land of the monastic and heard many a strange tale, but only rarely one as tragic as that of the frogman. A former celebrity of the Emerald City, a frog of remarkable size and wisdom, once so dapper and wise, foppish even, was now lowered in circumstances bereft of position, bereft even of clothes, ever since having bathed in the truth pond long ago. The frogman became compelled to tell everyone he meant the truth. This, he learned over time, was not something that most people wanted to hear. The beginning of the end came when the wizard, who he had scolded for magically removing some of Jenny Jump's less than pleasing personality traits. It was not the first time he'd hurt a friend's feelings, and so he went to the Wogglebug's College to study and develop his physical skills. But that endeavor nearly ended in horror when his froggish appetite suddenly asserted itself on the poor Wogglebug. Then it was that he journeyed from one companion to another, only to find himself offending them all with brutally honest speech that seemed to will itself from his mouth, no matter how hard he struggled to contain it. Finally, guilt-ridden and humbled to the point of ignominy, he shunned society altogether, making himself into the friendless and forlorn guardian of the truth pond. Squatting in self-exile, he took it upon himself to warn any who drew near to avoiding drinking from or bathing in the pond's pernicious pool. The truth, the frogman proclaimed, is not what it is cracked up to be. Like an amphibious counterpart to the ancient mariner, he told his story, determined to save others from the same foolish fumble that he had finished him off. Thus, he had saved Woot, and as the young man trudged on, he could only marvel at the degree of his own selfishness. How could he turn his back on one who was suffering so? How could he live with himself, forsaken and forlorn? The frogman would forever haunt his soul, and at last, Woot realized that no amount of friends, adventures, or distractions would allow him to regain the contentment that so often and easily came to him. This was not how Oz was supposed to be. This is not how Oz is supposed to be, Ozma proclaimed after telling the story she'd heard from Woot and Kate. It's not who we are. We don't allow our citizens, let alone our friends, to suffer. Ozma was in a rare state, incensed, determined, yet sad. The others in the throne room nodded in agreement. Betsy, Ojo, and Em dabbed at their misting eyes. Trot swallowed and grabbed hold of Cap'n Bill's hand. Even Scraps was unusually somber. Had I thought to look in on him, said Dorothy, the magic picture would have showed me how depressed he was, and we could have helped him sooner. The last I heard, said the wizard, he's gone to the professor's college. Let's see what happened at the professor's college. From which he went to the country of the youths, pointed out Professor Wogglebug, where he would often stay, but for long periods. None of us would have known he'd fallen into such depths. What matters is that we know now, Ozma declared. Then you'll help him? Asked Kate, the renowned cookie cook from the country of the Yips and close friend to the Frogman. She'd been the first person Woot visited, knowing as he did her relationship to the oversized frog. Woot didn't keep very many close companions. His independent nature dictated otherwise, but he'd been around long enough to know Oz was a land in which benevolent relationships, even more than magic, held things together. Of course we will, said the lavender bear, a large lavender-colored stuffed bear with pink eyes and a jeweled crown that represented his kingdom over Bear Center. Ozma would never let us down. Cake had insisted to Woot that they visit the lavender bear and tell him of the frogman's diminished state. The first thing the lavender bear did was to consult the little pink bear, the oracle of Bear Center, who advised them to go to the Emerald City. Woot only sighed. He didn't need an oracle to tell him that. I'm not certain how we can undo the enchantment of the pond, said the wizard, but I'm sure we'll find a way. I'll begin experimenting right away. Always optimistic, this bunch, thought Woot. The truth pond was old, ancient even, a creation of Lurleen, as the stories went, and magic, that old, was not easily undone. Woot remembered how hard it had been to break the enchantment of the cruel Yookapoo, Moina Yoop, who turned him into a green monkey. She now wore that form herself, but it had taken clever thinking on Ozma's part to figure out a solution. That won't be necessary, Oscar, replied Ozma with a steely glare. I've had enough of spells, enchantments, sorcery, and elixirs to last me a lifetime. We're going to break this curse upon our friend, and we're going to do it the old-fashioned way. Tin Woodman, Scarecrow, and some of you others, I'm going to need your help. Go away, please, said the bush, or rather the large frog, attempting to look behind the bush. But we've come over such a long way to you, said Cake. Who told us what had happened? I wish you'd come to me. Or to us, said Dorothy. We're your friends. I don't want anyone to see me like this. The voice was hoarse and low, altogether different in tone and cadence from the frogman they'd known. I understand, said Ozma. Everyone, please depart, except for the group I've designated. At Ozma's command, the large crowd, mostly made up of humans, walked away quietly down a path in the woods, leading to a large and cozy cabin where they'd awaited news. She suspected that things might not go as intended, and that the large show of support from so many might prove more embarrassing than heartening. They're gone now, said Ozma, once the crowd was no longer in sight. It's just us freaks. What? The frogman croaked, the top of his head emerging from behind the bush. What did you say? I said it's just us freaks, though I suppose I could have said grotesques, weirdos, oddballs. But why would you say such a thing? You of all beings who are the lowliest and loveliest person I've ever known. I say it because it's how you view yourself, though you ought not to. And I say it because if any one of us came into the world outside of Oz in the flesh, rather than just in stories, it's what they would call us. And they did, reminded the Tin Woodman sardonically. The Scarecrow, besides him, nodded assent. Don't remind me, cried the Wogglebug, who was amongst the group Ozma had sent to the outside world many, many years ago. Things had not gone as intended on that trip, for which reason only a fragment of their adventures were ever told. But from it, Ozma had learned much about the inhabitants of the United States. It was not long after that she had Glinda come and erect the barrier of invisibility around Oz. And I say it because you're not alone, Ozma said gently. You're amongst those who can understand you in ways that others might not. Will you come out? I would very much like to see your face again. Cautiously, the giant frog peeked above the bush, preparing to once again duck behind it, or even to flee if he could. for he was fast and strong. But the sight that greeted him surprised him. It wasn't just the look of sympathy. It was the fact that apart from Ozma and the wizard, the faces he saw were of fur, chain, burlap, chitin, mohair, meal, plant, wood, and even stone. At last he understood what Ozma had meant. I suppose that might be okay. The sight that greeted him was a heartbreaking one. The frogman, once so tall and bright-eyed, charming and droll, a dandy in manner and dress, was now a crouching, cowering lump of splotchy green flesh, who looked about furtively and seldom made eye contact. How had such a drastic change occurred in such a short time? It is quite good to see you again, friend, said the Wogglebug, as if there was nothing amiss. But those who knew the professor well could tell he was masking his distress. The others were quick to add warm wishes and heartfelt greetings. Among them stood the Scarecrow, Tin Woodman, Scraps, Jack Pumpkinhead, the Cowardly Lion, the Hungry Tiger, the Sawhorse, the Lavender Bear, Carter Green, the Vegetable Man, Benny, the Public Benefactor, Percy, the Giant Rat, and Spots, the Leopard, with the changing spots. It's good to see you as well. I appreciate that you've come. I must seem a horror to you in my present state. I think it would be best now for you to depart. You have been left alone for too long already, said the Tin Woodman mildly. We would have come sooner had we known. You don't understand, said the Frogman. How could you? You fear that because you're compelled to speak the truth, the wizard says, that you will offend us, make yourself unlovable, unwelcome, and even deplorable in our eyes. Have I not already done those things? The Frogman rejoined. No, exclaimed Scraps, never. We want you back home with us. I'm sorry, but I cannot. I offered you. No, Scraps protested. You didn't speak to me for days. I said things to nearly all of you, which caused great hurt. I nearly ate the professor. A temporary lapse, said the Wogglebug. You were merely developing your amphibious side, which had been around for so long, so much longer than your human qualities. Ah, do you not see the problem? Asked the king. I was never a human, though I put on great airs to look and behave like one. I was and should have remained a frog, and so I shall. Based on that logic, then I should go back to my old beanpole, suggested the Scarecrow. I shall have to hang there silent and still, for you know that scarecrows don't generally talk long. And I should return to Boston to become once more again a dead statue, stated Benny. They are not known to speak or ambulate in any world I've heard of. Neither do pumpkins and pieces of wood, said Jack Pumpkinhead, or logs and timbers, brayed the Sawhorse. And when was the last time you heard of talking veggies? Inquired Carter Green. Or of living stuffed bears, added the Lavender Bear, except in stories, of course. Should I leave my people and return to non-life as a child's toy? What about me, kiddo? Interjected Percy. Should I shrink and go back to the lab? You know what'll happen to me if I do, right? Were it not for the magic of Oz, I too would be dead, Nick Chopper pointed out, seeing as how I was dismembered by a cursed axe. And by the laws of the jungle, I would hunt and eat humans and other prey, said the Cowardly Lion. Just as I would eat fat babies to my heart's content, said the Hungry Tiger. How did I know you were going to say that? Asked the Leopard with the changing spots, rolling his eyes as his jagged stripes turned to lightning holes. Unlike you, at least I'm consistent, the Tiger retorted. Consistently maddening, added the Lion. But endearing, the Tiger added, to which the other two cats smiled. Do you understand now, asked Ozma, when I say that by the standards of the outside world, we are all freaks in one way or another? You have convinced yourself that you are nothing more than a frog and should thus live a frog's life. But this is not the truth, except by the cold thinking of some in the so-called civilized lands. Oz is not as they are. Here, I was a tiny fairy who became a baby girl, who grew up as a boy, who was turned back into a girl to become the ruler of a land. By comparison, all you did was grow bigger and wiser and become a boon companion to everyone. The frogman's eyes widened, and he looked about at each of the faces who'd spoken, and something akin to hope. Is it possible, then? Can you break the spell of the truth pond? Alas, my old friend, I haven't yet found a way, said the wizard, but I'm certain I will. At that, the frogman seemed to shrink back into himself again. No, friend wizard, you know as well as I that it cannot be done, not even by one as talented as you. I don't think even the magic belt can help me. The enchantment of the pond is too strong. Can't you just lie? Asked Percy. I mean, not that we really do that here in Oz, but maybe if you tried it would break the spell. I'm afraid I have tried, said the frogman. Once I discovered what was happening to me, I studied all I could about the truth pond in the Royal Library, in the Professor's College, in Bookville, and other places. I learned that the effects are not as intense for those who drink a small amount of water. I also learned of a loophole, even for one who's bathed in the pond. One can make himself tell a lie. It's not easy, but it can be done. There's a catch, however. The liar's ears glow green to alert the person he's speaking of to his deception. Well, said Scraps, do you see my natural coloring? For one who is already green, the loophole doesn't work. I'm sorry, friends, but as you see, I cannot return to your world. I cannot again bear the responsibility of being truth teller all the time. It's too much. Very well, then, said Scarecrow. You leave us no choice. Although I'm sure to get soggy, and Nick will no doubt rest, we're going in the truth pond. We're all going in, bellowed Scraps defiantly. You can't, exclaimed the giant frog with great alarm. You know what happened to me. We can't leave you here, old friend, said the Tin Woodman. In this way, you'll not be alone. We'll all speak truth and live the truth. I cannot allow that, cried the frog, not clearly upset. Who knows what terrible thing might befall you? You said in yourselves you might not even remain alive. I need no truth pond, intoned Benny. I have always spoken and believed in the truth. If you are saying it is unwise to live the truth, then it must be unwise for us all. If you are saying it is dishonest for you to be different from how you were born, then it must be dishonest for us as well. In this, what you are saying. I don't know, said the frogman, crestfallen. I'm not as wise as I once pretended to be. I don't have any answer. That is not entirely true either, isn't Ozma, but there is a truth greater than what you perceive. It does not crouch in the shadows of remorse, but is proclaimed from the rooftops. The world needs you because it needs truth tellers. Frog remained silent. After you told me the truth about I had lobotomized Jenny Jump, stated the wizard, and how it was just as bad as what I did to the glass cat, you left the Emerald City fearing you'd hurt and upset me. But had you stuck around, you'd have discovered what I did with the wisdom you gave me. I restored the qualities I took from her: ill temper, envy, and ambition. I was wrong to have done so. You showed me that. And listen to me, Froggy, hollered Scraps. I wasn't mad at you because you didn't compliment my new human eyes. I was mad at me because I was fishing for compliments. And when you said I'm not always as smart as I think, said the Scarecrow, you made me realize how big a head I'd gotten. Wizard, you must have put too much brown in my head. No more lobotomies for me, the wizard laughed. I've learned my lesson. As have I, added the Tin Woodman. You said to me that one who considers himself as loving as he does has a funny way of showing it with an axe constantly at his side. Well, you were right. And guess what? I didn't bring it with me today. The frogman looked from person to person as each took turns explaining how what he'd told them had benefited them in one way or another. Suddenly a shape emerged from the woods, which resolved into Cake. I'm sorry, Ozma, but I had to come. I'm his oldest friend. You are, said Ozma warmly. I'm glad you could join us. They're right, you know, she said to the frogman, reaching out gently to touch his forelimb. You thought you'd hurt my feelings when you said it's the magic dishpan that makes my cookies good. Oh, I know it better than most. You should have sampled my baking before I found it. It was awful. Everyone laughed. The truth doesn't offend me. I want the truth always. And I want you to come and live with me for so long as you can tolerate me. With that, she kissed him on his forehead. I hope you weren't expecting to turn me into a prince, the frogman said mordantly. No, because you already are one, she rejoined. We want you back in the Emerald City too, said Jack, and everyone else loudly voiced their agreement. We miss you, Frog Face, said Scraps, hopping on Benny's back. The living statue smiled and said, things have not been the same without you. The frogman's tears threatened to spill over, but once more he stiffened. And when I tell you the truth, as I must in all things, but then. The truth may be important, said the wizard, but it's not always easy to hear. You must learn to be patient with people. Your real friends will know it comes from a good place. That's right, said Wood, also emerging from the woods. Sorry, Ozma, but I owe him something too after he helped me. But I can't speak for the others behind me. Ozma shook her head and laughed, as with the rest of the group who'd followed. Root emerged from the past. If you want us to go, we will, said Dorothy, but we just wanted you to know that we support you no matter what. And we're not made of paper, asserted Trot. Well, at least not most of us. We can handle the truth. You would never desert me, said Betsy, and we're not deserting you. Woot then continued, I mean, just look at the sacrifice you were willing to make to save us from the pond. Save me. This time the frogman's tears did spill over. I am very touched and I love all of you as well. But what about the pond? I have a responsibility to ensure that no one else suffers the same fate I did. If I leave here, how will others be warned not to go in? I think the sign is sufficient to take care of that, said the wizard. Besides, I'm not convinced it was the pond that caused this. Of course it was, said the frogman. How could it have been anything else? If I'm to tell the truth, said the wizard with a smile, I think it was mostly you. Me? Croaked the frogman. What do you mean? I've been pondering the situation as well, informed the scarecrow, and I think the wizard's correct. My heart tells me as much, added the Tin Woodman, as does my education, said the Wogglebug pompously. Surely you need something from my classes. I learned to avoid you, countered the frogman. Even now I worry what will happen if I get hungry. Nonsense, replied the Wogglebug. I have no such worry. Think about your past, how you felt about yourself, and then ask yourself who you really are. Those are things I'd rather forget, he said quietly, and then in a whisper added, the poor butterflies I killed. This unfortunate incident had occurred when the frogman allowed an enchanted moose into the truth pond. You told me what happened, said Woot gently, but the moose dissolved into its true form, 57 butterflies, which I proceeded to devour, the frogman wept. Well, on that front, I have good news, said the wizard. You counted 57, but you missed one who escaped and who has since laid many eggs, which have gone to become caterpillars and butterflies. That is good, but that does not absolve me of what I did to the others, the ones I devoured. They're already drowning, Root reminded him, dying through no fault of your own. We're not the one who enchanted them into a moose. It is good to hear my subjects value life as you do, said Ozma, even those non-sapient creatures that live here. Yet, there are those that must prey on them to survive. This cycle of life is not often seen in Oz, yet it exists here too. The butterflies that perished that day will live on in the offspring of its surviving companion. How is that possible? Asked the frogman, incredulous. I don't know, Ozma answered honestly. It is a mystery whether it's related to the truth pond or it has something to do with the larger enchantments Lurleen placed over Oz. I cannot say. I can only confirm that we were told by the surviving butterfly herself. Well, if the pond can do that, then it's surely not cursed, marveled Wood. I'll prove it to you. And with that, Woot removed his coat, took a running leap into the truth pond. The frogman was gasped. And the truth be told, so were some of the others who backed away from the water that splashed out. But the boy only laughed and swam for a moment. It's wonderful in here. But now you're doomed, lamented the frogman. Hardly, said Woot as he emerged, soaked head to toe, and walked over to the frogman. The truth can't harm me, not in Oz anyway. And so, to be perfectly honest, not that I have a choice anymore, I feel good. I feel better than I have in a long time. In that case, Woot, said the wizard, why don't you tell the frogman how he looks to you? Woot laughed, gladly, for one thing. The frogman cried out in alarm, stop, stop. But why? Why, I already know the truth about myself, and it's more than I can bear. I've always known it, long before I found the truth find. I knew it when I was a young tadpole. Everyone always seemed smarter, stronger, better looking. Growing up made no difference. I just learned to hide my feelings better. It was like gazing up at a happy, beautiful world from the bottom of a deep hole. Couldn't you have just hopped out? Asked the pumpkinhead. You've got strong legs. Not that kind of hole, kiddo, said Percy, an emotional hole. Oh, I get it, said Jack. But Jack is right, declared Woot. You do need to hop out of that hole. And that's why I'm going to tell you what I see when I look at you. You think I see all those things you just said, but I don't. I mean, yeah, I see a great big naked frog, for a certainty, but I also see a friend that I love, and one of the most beautiful sights in the whole world. The frogman gaped as a general chorus of agreement followed this speech. None of us is perfect, said Woot. They call me the wanderer, but no one really knows why I wander. Not that I'm inclined to tell anyone, except to say that you're not the only one who didn't have a wonderful, magical childhood. I've been running since I left home, and I haven't stopped since. And I suspect that others here can tell similar stories. It might explain why Button Bright gets lost all the time, Dorothy said to Betsy and Trot. Could be, said Trot. I know I wasn't always the nicest person in the world. That's no surprise, joked Betsy. But I'll bet you didn't know that before you met me, I was standoffish and judgmental. What do you mean before? Trot deadpanned. Froggy, Scraps blurted, do you understand what everyone is saying? I believe I do, the frogman said, and although he still crouched, his posture seemed straighter, his coloring less pale, his eyes clearer and focused. Good, because I don't yell about the short girl, so explain it. It's the truth we all hide from ourselves most of all. I assumed others were better, and that meant there was something defective about me. I felt much the same, said the leopard with the changeable spots, his fireball pattern changing to trumpets. In my case, it was others who made me feel that way, and for a long time, I believed them and thought there was something wrong with me. And sometimes we just make bad choices, said Carter Green, but he didn't elaborate. Quite common, said the Wogglebug, especially for us so-called freaks, as Ozma put it. But those who suffer with insecurities tend to overcompensate to cover up their perceived flaws. But it's close. It's those very things that make us unique, that make us special. I don't have any insecurities, Bugman, and I'm quite special, mocked Scraps. Indeed, he said doubtfully, shaking his head. When you bathed in the truth pond, the wizard said, it brought the old fears to the fore. Why couldn't I see? Frogman asked. The water should not have allowed me to hide the truth from myself. The worst lie is the one we hide from ourselves, the wizard asked. I think you were compelled to tell the truth to everyone all the time because you refuse to confront it in yourself. It's the loophole you spoke of. It worked, but the consequences were different. If I had been more courageous, I'd have known I never needed to compare myself or worry about being the smartest, strongest, best looking. You're smart, strong, and good looking enough, Frogface, sang Scraps. And you care about people, added Cake. Loyalty and kindness are what we teach our young bears, said the king of Bear Center, and those are the qualities you embody. Father said those are the best qualities anyone can have, adding Jack, looking over to Ozma, who smiled in assent. Thank you, said the frogman. I used to advise others of these things, but I never applied them to myself. I suppose that one cannot see the truth in the world if one does not accept the truth in oneself. Ozma seized the frogman's hand and patiently drew him to his feet. It had been a long time since his lad stood upright like a man, and he wasn't sure he wouldn't tumble. But he girded himself, and when Ozma let go, he managed it just fine, as if he was born to it. So now you know the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but, she answered. And pulling out her wand, waved it. She magicked an elegant set of clothes upon him. Oh, these are quite nice, said the giant frog, admiring himself. I never thought I'd wear clothes again or have friends again. a life beyond the truth pond. Welcome back, old friends of the Wogglebug, and everyone in agreement echoed his exclamation and went over to hug the frogman, who wept so many tears of joy that both Scraps and the Scarecrow were soaking wet, but in truth, they didn't mind at all. And that was a story by Joe Bongiorno, the owner and publisher of the Royal Historian of Oz and the writer of several new Oz books. We hope that you have enjoyed this story this morning and that you will join us again to help us celebrate 50 years of Oziana. Thank you very much.